My name is Nancy, and my knack for understanding people probably steered me toward a career in psychology. I ran my own clinic and dedicated countless hours to helping clients navigate their struggles, a bit ironic, considering the upheaval I faced later on. As I neared my late 30s, the yearning for a family caught me off guard. It was so unexpected that even my best friend, Chloe, noticed my urgency. Over coffee one day, she suggested setting me up with her second cousin. "Come on, Nancy. Ethan's a great catch, smart, funny, and stable. What's there to lose?" she urged. I hesitated, swirling my coffee. "I don't know, Chloe. Blind dates aren't my thing." She chuckled. "It's hardly blind if I show you his picture first. Plus, you guys can talk online before meeting. It's perfect." That evening, I found myself sending a friend request to Ethan on social media. To my surprise, we clicked instantly. Ethan, a year my senior at 40, was engaging and seemed to genuinely care about our conversations, which flowed seamlessly. After several weeks of chatting, we decided to meet face to face. On the day of our first date, I was a bundle of nerves waiting at our chosen coffee shop. When Ethan arrived, he was as charming as I'd imagined, tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He approached, extending his hand. "Nancy." I smiled back. "That's me. Nice to finally meet you, Ethan." Any initial nerves dissolved as we talked for hours, only to be reminded by the barista that they were closing. As we stepped into the evening breeze, Ethan suggested, "I had a great time, Nancy. Would you like to do this again?" Without a second thought, I agreed, and just like that, I was diving into a relationship with him. Our dates multiplied, from dinners to strolls in the park and even weekend trips. However, as things progressed, I noticed an oddity: Ethan's phone never stopped buzzing. Initially, I dismissed it. Everyone's busy, right? But the constant interruptions seemed excessive. One evening, after another pleasant dinner, his phone vibrated incessantly. Trying to sound casual, I commented, "Busy night." Ethan gave a sheepish smile. "Oh, it's just my mom checking in." I raised an eyebrow. "Your mom? At this hour?" He appeared uneasy but explained, "Yeah, we're very close. She raised me alone after my dad passed when I was young. I even had severe bronchial asthma as a child, and she was my lifesaver." Listening to him, I realized their bond was not just close but overwhelmingly central to his life. Choosing my words carefully, I remarked, "Sounds like you two have a special connection." Ethan nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. I owe her everything." As a psychologist, warning bells rang in my head. The dynamic Ethan described seemed excessively codependent. Despite my professional instincts nudging me, I shelved my concerns. After all, I was his girlfriend, not his therapist. Time flew, and before I knew it, Ethan and I had been together for nearly a year. He was thoughtful and caring, and our relationship felt deeply rooted. Yet, there remained a persistent unease about his overly close relationship with his mother. One afternoon, while having lunch at my apartment, Ethan, visibly anxious, started fidgeting with his napkin. "Nancy, I'd like you to meet my mom. I think you'll really like her, and she's excited to meet you too." The following weekend, we stood outside a quaint three-story home. My palms were sweaty, but Ethan squeezed my hand reassuringly and rang the doorbell. The door opened to reveal a petite woman with graying hair and eyes as kind as Ethan's. "You must be Nancy," she greeted warmly, embracing me unexpectedly. "I'm Carol. Come in, come in." As we settled into the living room, I couldn't help but notice Carol's intense focus on Ethan. She doted on him, offering snacks and drinks, while I felt somewhat invisible. Carol dominated the conversation, reminiscing about Ethan's childhood and fussing over his well-being. When we finally left, I was emotionally exhausted, whereas Ethan seemed completely unaware of the tension. "So, what did you think?" he asked excitedly as we drove away. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "Your mom loves you very much," I replied. Ethan beamed. "She's great, isn't she? I knew you'd like her." I managed to smile, not wanting to deflate his spirits, but inside, I was troubled by the dynamics I had observed. Months later, the complexity of our situation became even more apparent when Ethan proposed. Despite my concerns about his relationship with his mother, I accepted. I loved him and believed we could overcome any challenges together. We decided to move in together into my apartment and soon began planning our wedding. However, I hadn't anticipated how overwhelming Carol's involvement would be. She inserted herself into every aspect of the wedding planning and seemed to be constantly in crisis, demanding Ethan's attention for everything from a leaking sink to a stubbed toe. One evening, as we discussed flower arrangements, Ethan's phone interrupted us. "What's wrong, Mom?" "The sink's leaking." "I'll be right there," he said, hanging up and turning to me apologetically. "I've got to go help Mom. You know how she is with plumbers." This scene became a daily occurrence. If Ethan ever showed reluctance, Carol's voice would crack over the speakerphone. "After all I've done for you, I just need a little help." Is that too much to ask? I reached my limit one night after yet another Carol emergency. Gently, I suggested to Ethan, "I think it might be helpful if we saw a couples therapist, someone who could help us navigate this situation with your mom. Her demands seem a bit excessive." Ethan's voice rose in defense. "She raised me alone, Nancy. She saved my life multiple times. How can you call that excessive?" With the implications of our entwined lives, Ethan saw only devotion. This was more than just a mother's love, it was a deep-seated bond that shaped every aspect of our relationship, and we needed to address it together. Realizing I had touched a sensitive issue, I quickly softened my approach. "I'm not questioning her love for you, Ethan. I'm just concerned about how it's affecting us," I explained. Ethan's demeanor softened. "Okay, maybe you're right, but let's deal with it after the wedding, okay? We're swamped right now, and I don't want to add any more stress." I knew I should have insisted on resolving these issues before we got married, but I was too worn out from constantly navigating around Carol's overwhelming presence. Reluctantly, I agreed to his request. Time sped up as we plunged into a whirlwind of wedding preparations, cake tastings, dress fittings, and endless calls with Carol about every little detail. Before I knew it, the wedding was just days away. Despite the stress, I was genuinely excited about the celebration, especially my bachelorette party. It promised a night of carefree fun, away from wedding stress and Carol's overbearing influence. The night of the party, we hit our favorite bar, and I reveled in the laughter and dancing. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. But then, amidst the fun, my phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice laden with panic. "Nancy, Mom's in the hospital. Her blood pressure spiked. I'm heading there now." I quickly filled in my friends and hailed a taxi. The ride to the hospital was agonizing, my mind swirling with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, Carol's dramatics were in full swing. Seeing me, she clutched her chest and exclaimed, "Oh, it's you. My blood pressure, it's your fault, with all this wedding stress." I stood frozen, shocked by her accusation. Ethan, looking apologetic yet firm, intervened. "Nancy, could you wait outside just for a bit?" Stunned, I complied and sat outside in the corridor, lost in thought as medical staff bustled around. After some time, I gathered my composure and approached the nurse's station. Maintaining my professional demeanor, I introduced myself to a doctor nearby. I'm Nancy, Carol Thompson's future daughter-in-law. Could you update me on her condition? The doctor glanced up, his face neutral. Mrs. Thompson's blood pressure is elevated, but it's not dangerously high. We're keeping her monitored, but there's no immediate danger. Relieved yet still concerned, I continued, I'm a psychologist, and I'm worried she might be dealing with psychological issues. Has she had a psychological evaluation? The doctor raised his eyebrows, slightly intrigued by my observation. We haven't considered a psychological assessment yet, but it sounds like a good idea given your concerns. I'll make a note to refer her for an evaluation. I thanked him for his understanding and returned to my seat, waiting for Ethan. As time passed and he didn't appear, I felt a deep sense of defeat. Finally, I texted him, heading home. Call me when you can, and ordered another taxi. Back at the apartment, my friends sent messages wondering where I had disappeared to. I apologized and encouraged them to continue enjoying the night without me. It was past midnight when Ethan finally returned, looking utterly drained. Hey, he said softly, noticing I was still awake. Sitting up, I tried to keep my voice free of hurt and anger. How's your mom? He sighed and collapsed into the armchair across from me. She's okay. They're keeping her overnight for observation. She was really upset and kept asking me not to leave her alone. Ethan's words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the complex dynamics we would need to navigate as we moved forward together. Ethan, I can't ignore this any longer. Don't you realize what's going on? His eyes filled with a silent plea as they met mine. Nancy, please, not tonight. Let's just head to bed. I'm worn out. I wanted to press on, to make him understand, but the weariness etched across his face stopped me. Reluctantly, I agreed, swallowing down my disappointment. The awaited day finally came. Just before the ceremony, Ethan pulled me aside, his expression serious. Listen, I know there's been tension with Mom lately, but I've arranged a few things to keep the peace today. Just play along, okay? My heart sank. What had he planned? I wondered silently. Ethan quickly outlined the adjustments, a special menu for his mom due to her supposed allergies, a prime spot next to him at the head table, her favorite songs on the DJ's playlist, and even a speech she insisted on giving. Closing my eyes, I counted to 15, then agreed softly. For us, Ethan. He kissed me, a gesture of thanks, as I forced a smile and rejoined my bridesmaids. The ceremony was enchanting, and as I walked toward Ethan, his face alight with joy, my doubts momentarily vanished. For a brief moment, it felt like it was just us. The reception unfolded exactly as Ethan had warned. Carol dominated the head table, charming the guests with tales of Ethan's youth and barely acknowledging me, except for the occasional patronizing pat on the hand. When the speeches commenced, my heart sank as Carol approached the microphone, wine glass in hand. My dear friends and family, she began, her voice shaky. Today, we celebrate my son's wedding. She droned on about Ethan's achievements and her sacrifices, barely mentioning me. After what felt like an eternity, she concluded with a toast that oddly grouped me with her past happiness. I drained my champagne, feeling a mix of irritation and resignation. The rest of the evening was a blur of dancing, laughter, and cake, but Carol's presence was omnipresent, inserting herself into every moment. The wedding ended, but Carol's involvement didn't. She called daily, inventing new crises to demand Ethan's attention. One day, as Ethan reached for his keys, I finally voiced my concerns. Ethan, we need to talk. This isn't healthy. He acknowledged the problem, suggesting therapy as I had before, but each weekend brought new excuses to delay, Carol's errands, chores, or the cat's vet visits. 5 months into our marriage, the constant interruptions and lack of boundaries were suffocating. When I earned some vacation time, I seized the chance. "Ethan, let's go on a honeymoon. Just us, away from all this." To my relief, his face brightened. "That sounds amazing, Nancy. Where shall we go?" As we began planning our tropical escape, a spark of excitement ignited within me. For the first time in months, I felt a real sense of hope. This getaway was our opportunity to rekindle our connection and rediscover the reasons we fell in love. Ethan assured me enthusiastically, "I'll handle everything, the flights, the hotel, everything. And when we get back, we'll address the issues with Mom and maybe explore that therapy option we discussed." The day we were set to leave, I was nearly vibrating with excitement as we drove to the airport. Ethan seemed a little preoccupied, which I attributed to nerves about flying. At the check-in counter, he handed me my boarding pass. A quick glance caused me to pause in confusion. It read economy. Puzzled, I turned to him. "Economy? I thought we'd be together." Ethan shifted uneasily. "Well, I had some credit card points to use, but only enough for one first-class ticket. Since I'm taller, it seemed practical for me to take it. It'll save us some money overall." My heart sank. On our honeymoon, togetherness should have been the priority. Couldn't we have both flown economy and sat together? I questioned, my voice tinged with hurt. "Come on, Nancy, don't make a big deal out of this. It's just a few hours," he replied, a note of irritation in his voice. Trying to hold on to the fragments of my excitement, I made one more plea. "Can I at least come to the first-class lounge with you before the flight? We could pay extra." "No," Ethan replied sharply. "The ticket's in my name, they won't let you in. Look, I need to check in. I'll see you on the other side, okay?" Before I could say anything further, he was off, heading toward the first-class check-in. Feeling deflated, I trudged through security and settled into the regular boarding lounge. As I sat there, trying to cling to my dwindling excitement, a familiar figure caught my eye near the first-class lounge. It was a flash of gray hair and a floral dress, undoubtedly Carol's style. My heart raced. Was this my imagination, or was something off? Ethan's odd insistence on flying first class alone, his refusal to let me into the lounge, it all began to form a distressing picture. Compelled by a mix of hurt and suspicion, I approached the lounge desk. "Excuse me," I began, presenting my credit card. "I'd like to buy access to the lounge." The attendant looked skeptical but processed my request. Card in hand, I steadied myself for whatever lay ahead. As I entered the lounge, my eyes scanned the area until they landed in a secluded corner. There, Ethan and Carol sat close together, engaged in quiet conversation over coffee. Feeling betrayed, I strode toward them, my heels echoing sharply against the polished floor. They looked up in shock as I approached. Ethan's face went pale. "Nancy," he stammered, rising to his feet. "What are you doing here?" "I might ask you the same," I responded, my voice ice-cold. "Care to explain why you're here cozying up with your mother rather than with your wife?" Ethan glanced around nervously. "Nancy, please," he murmured. "Let's not do this here. I can explain everything after we land. I promise." Before I could respond, Carol's sickeningly sweet voice cut in. "Oh, Nancy, dear. What a surprise. Ethan and I were just about to enjoy a lovely first-class trip together. Isn't that nice?" Amidst the chaos of the airport lounge, my disbelief and hurt collided. Ethan confessed the real reason behind our separate travel arrangements. "Nancy, honestly, I used the points for 2 first-class tickets," he admitted, his face a canvas of regret and tension. "I thought Mom could use a treat." "And what about your wife, Ethan?" I exploded, letting go of any restraint. "We're supposed to be building our lives together, but here you are planning a luxury trip with your mother while relegating me to economy like an afterthought." Silence enveloped the lounge as all eyes turned to us, but the weight of their stares couldn't match the weight on my heart. "Do you even grasp what the past months have been like?" My words tumbled out, fueled by accumulated grievances, endless calls, trumped-up emergencies, his habitual prioritizing of her needs over ours, and now this betrayal. As Ethan reached out, trying to soothe the storm with a touch, I recoiled. "Nancy, let's not overreact. We'll have plenty of time to talk this through during the holiday. I'm sure we can resolve this." His words felt empty. "Resolve this?" I echoed, my voice hollow with resignation. "There's nothing left to resolve, Ethan. I'm done. I'm going home to file for divorce." His face paled. "Divorce? You can't mean that, Nancy." Before more could be said, Carol rose, her smirk barely concealed. Wrapping her arm around Ethan, she declared, "Well, if that's your decision, dear, it's probably for the best. Let's not miss our flight, Ethan." I stood frozen as they walked away, Ethan casting a look back filled with a mix of sorrow and something akin to relief. As they vanished into the crowd, the reality of my solitude hit me. Yet, as I exited the lounge, a new sense of freedom began to unfurl within me. Once home, I methodically packed up Ethan's possessions, his clothes, the books we shared, and even the quirky gifts from Carol. Each item was a thread in the tapestry of our life together, now being disassembled. I sent everything to a storage unit, a clear and decisive step towards separation. The following day, I contacted a lawyer and started the divorce proceedings. Signing those papers lifted an immense burden. With Ethan out of the picture, I reclaimed my space and my life. I transformed our apartment, reconnecting with friends, embracing new hobbies, and immersing myself in books long neglected. A month later, Ethan reached out. A text appeared on my phone, but any former affection had been replaced by resolve. I replied with details of where he could find his belongings and where to send the signed divorce papers. Then I blocked his number, severing the final ties. Refreshed by my newfound independence, I returned to my professional life with vigor. My personal ordeal enriched my understanding of codependency, inspiring a series of research papers that resonated with the academic community. This led to an invitation to speak at a local college, which soon turned into a teaching offer. It was there, amidst the corridors of academia, that I met Eric, a colleague in the psychology department. His presence was comforting, marked by a warmth that seemed to understand and acknowledge the journey I had undertaken. This new chapter, while unexpected, was filled with promise and new beginnings. As Eric smiled at me, our connection deepened, not just through our shared research interests but also over our mutual appreciation for terrible puns. Unlike Ethan, Eric was independent, respected boundaries, and carried a confident air about him. He had a teenage daughter from a previous relationship, and observing how he skillfully managed his roles as both a father and a partner while advancing his career was inspiring. One quiet evening, while we were grading papers together, my phone buzzed with a message from Chloe, the friend who had introduced me to Ethan. The message read, "Hey, Nancy. Thought you should know that Ethan is still living with Carol. If anything, they seem even closer now. I'm so sorry for my part in all this. Hope you're doing okay." I paused, the message stirring old feelings for a moment. Setting my phone aside, I glanced up to find Eric watching me, a look of concern in his eyes. "Everything all right?" he asked gently. In that instant, a wave of calm washed over me. I realized how far I had come from those days of frustration and compromise. With a genuine smile, I responded, "Yeah, everything's fine." And it truly was. Whatever was happening between Ethan and Carol was no longer my concern. I was on a new journey, surrounded by people who supported and respected me, and living a life defined by my own choices and paths. As Eric poured us both another cup of coffee, we shared a quiet laugh about the ridiculous grading mistakes students made. In his presence, I found not only companionship but also a deeper understanding of what a healthy, balanced relationship should look like. My life, once overshadowed by the overbearing presence of Carol and the neglect of Ethan, had transformed into something vibrant and fulfilling. Through my struggles, I rediscovered myself and found a partner who valued my independence and strength. And for the first time in years, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future.